members to order. I'm Eric Greenberg, Chair of the Columbia Association Board of Directors. Please remember that this special meeting of the members of the Columbia Association is being live streamed. You can find tonight's agenda and background materials on the CA Board's webpage. I will now call the roll. Dick. Lynn. Brian.
Here.
Josh.
Present.
Ellen.
Here.
Keith.
And present.
Here.
Bill.
Here.
Andy.
Here.
Ginny.
Here.
And I am here.
Mr. Chair, just a quick point. I didn't hear. Did you say we're sitting as the Columbia Council? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
this is it. Right now, we're sitting as the members of the, it's actually the members of the Columbia Association.
Okay.
So the 10 of us are members of the Columbia Association and on the Columbia Council.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
So can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Any objections to the motion as moved by Ginny and seconded by Ellen? There being no objections, the agenda is so moved. The first item on the agenda is the election of the Long Reach representative of the CA Board to the CA Board of Directors.
So moved.
Okay, I'll get a motion to move the resolution.
So moved.
Can I get a second by Keith? Motion by Ginny, second by Keith to move the resolution, which reads as follows. Election of the director to the board, whereas the following person, effective February 8th, 2023, is the Columbia Council representative appointed by the Board of Directors of the Long Reach Community Association, Joshua Friedman of Long Reach. Whereas pursuant to the terms of the Columbia Association Charter and bylaws, such Columbia Council representative is a member of the corporation. Now therefore be it resolved that the members hereby elect to the Board of Directors effective February 23rd, 2023, Joshua Friedman, the newly appointed Columbia Council representative from Long Reach. I will now call the roll. Dick? Lynn? Brian?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Ellen?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The motion passes 802.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you kindly.
Welcome aboard.
Much appreciated.
Now you have to stand up on the thing and sing your college face.
Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
A motion to adjourn by Ginny. Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Second by Keith. Is there any objections to adjourning? Therefore, the special meeting is hereby adjourned. p.m. I am Eric Greenberg, Chair of the CA Board of Directors. Please remember that this meeting of the CA Board of Directors is being live streamed. You can find tonight's agenda and background materials on the CA Board's webpage. Links to these documents can also be found in the description section of our YouTube live stream for those that are watching this meeting there. If you are virtual, please mute your microphones unless speaking. If you are in the room, please ensure that all cell phones are silenced. Raise your hand to speak and I'll record the names in the order I see them. If you're virtual, please raise your hand in the virtual feature. As we move through the agenda, I will introduce each item on the agenda. Before a vote is taken, I will restate a motion as well as who motioned it and seconded. If at any point you have trouble hearing me or any other board member, please say so. Tonight's timekeeper is Alan Klein. I will now call the roll. Dennis.
Here.
Dick.
Here.
Lynn.
Here.
Brian.
Here.
Josh.
Here.
Alan.
Here.
Keith. Here. Bill.
Here.
Andy.
Here.
Vinny.
Here.
And I am here. Before we begin, got a couple announcements. We have an announcement of a closed meeting of the Board of Directors that was held on February 8th to discuss a personnel matter. And we also have an announcement of a closed meeting of the Columbia Association Board of Directors Architectural Resource Committee that occurred February 13th. Voting members present at that meeting were Deb Bach, Carolyn Payton, and Susan Sloan.
Mr. Chairman, at our work session earlier this month, I had mentioned a few meetings that got passed over earlier or late in '22. Do those need to be read into the record at this point?
I believe all the meetings have been read in, but if there's a specific meeting you had, I can read it in. But we read in meetings at the last work session. So unless there's a specific one you have in mind?
Those meetings that we missed were captured in the notes, but it was mentioned in the minutes, but it's mentioned in the minutes that it would be taken care of at this meeting.
So if it's mentioned in the minutes, then we announced them, then we obviously announced the meeting.
At this point, so the board held closed meeting phone.
Yeah, we last,
Bill?
at the last meeting, we announced the January 25th meeting, December 1st, December 19th, October 12th, November 14th, and January 4th.
Okay,
So those have been announced.
work session meeting, I just wanted to make sure we were in the right place in
Yep.
capturing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Can I ask to adjust the agenda at this point?
Well, I was going to, yeah.
Well, first we got
After it's moved
to
and
move the agenda.
So moved.
So we got a motion by Ginny to move the agenda. Can I get a second on the agenda?
Second.
So I get a motion by Ginny, a second by Alan. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Keith?
I'd like to make a motion to, in the sake of time and topics, I'm just going to read it because I was kind of taking notes about it. But there's been no substantial discussion around increasing the rate and cap, and the appointment at this meeting of the interim CEO has already been announced. We've largely discussed the BOD statement on the general plan and playground programs. The board information has also been posted for review, and there are no presenters on the topics that I can see. So if there's material information at the resident speak out, I think we can always remove some of these items from the consent agenda. So I'd like to make a motion to amend the consent agenda to include the approval of the CA interim, the annual charge rate, the annual charge cap, the Totland plan resolution, pilot play, strategic play, and BOD statement on the general plan.
I don't believe these can go on the consent agenda.
Typically, a consent agenda allows for the board to approve the consent agenda, and everything that's underneath the consent agenda is just approved if there's no substantial discussion that needs to occur on it.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I got a second. So you want to put everything under board votes A through I, all on the consent agenda.
Except the only thing that's standing out are the budget items for discussion.
So that would be, so you want to put on the consent agenda A, B, C, D, H, I, J, K, and L. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's the interim CEO, annual charge rate and cap, TOT plan resolution, pilot play, strategic plan, and the BOD statement.
So not D.
Well, you can't put D and F. Those are conflicting motions.
E, F, and G are.
Oh, yeah, E, F, and G, sorry. E, F, and G are conflicting motions.
Right, so he wasn't putting those in.
Yeah, so, okay. So if we put these on the consent agenda, there can't be any objections. to doing so. Ginny?
Yeah, I don't know if there's going to be discussion by our colleagues or not, so it's really unusual to be putting, especially, I think we deserve to kind of congratulate Dennis and wish him well and all that, so I hate to see A, just not have any discussion. B, the annual charge rate, the same thing. You never know if somebody's going to suddenly change their mind and want to increase it or decrease it. The same with C, that's happened to us in the past. And E, F, and G we already discussed. I think that was it, right? Oh, no, the play plan, there's this, I know, I have some discussion on that.
So if you...
I mean, we would get out earlier, that's true.
That is true, if we want to get on record time, but if Ginny, if you object to it,
Yeah.
then the motion must fail.
Why is that it has to fail?
Because then there's no consent. So
could we knock
to
that-
be on the consent agenda, everyone would have to consent to it, and so if there's an objection...
Eric, if you could have a friendly amendment to include the one thing Jenny's interested in.
To remove the one thing she's interested in.
I think she was interested in everything.
I think I've pretty well
Alan?
covered.
Yeah, I think Bill had his hand up
Bill?
before I did.
Just a point with regard to the budget items, including the rate cap and all of operating capital budget and the grants. The grant issue is still up in the air, and the amount of the grant is specifically up in the air. Now, during our discussion during the work session, the comment was made that staff should just find where to put that, to get that money. The rate, the cap, the capital budget, and the operating budget, I think, are all in play to find the money if any grant is going to be awarded. So I don't think that, I think all of those have to be up for discussion.
Point of information.
Okay.
Point of information, I wasn't intending for those. That's the reason I read the specific ones that I wanted to. I think that the budget overall and the amendments to the budget, the three items that we were to consider should be discussed is the point of information.
Alan?
I think Keith, and somebody who knows parliamentary procedure better than I do might know this, but I think a point of information is when one is asking for information,
Okay.
not giving information.
Perfect.
But I would like to ask you, I wasn't clear on your rationale, and I'll say, and so I want to ask you, but I will say before I ask, if these things don't end up having a lot of discussion, as with the meeting of the members we just had, they could be disposed of quickly.
Yeah.
So if it's saving time, I think we can save time by just going through them quickly. But I'd love to hear more of your thinking about why you wanted to put them on the consent agenda.
Typically, in terms of preparation for the board meeting, the expectation is that we're all reading the information that's in the board meeting. We've had a full work session for a number of hours where we discussed all of these in detail. So the assumption is that the information that's in there at this point, unless there are major objections, that we've all considered it, we've discussed it at length, and unless there's a significant problem with the content that's being presented, I would think at this point, following a work session, that we'd be able to take all of those items, put them into the consent agenda so that we can move forward. I'd take a friendly amendment, for Dennis to celebrate his appointment. I was just doing that because, it's already been announced around the.
And so let me just say in response that I get your point, and I think as we look, and I would love to have us look at how we do ourselves, how we work ourselves, and be more intentional about that. But our practice over time has not been to come. Let me put in the positive. Our practice often has been to come to a meeting and have further discussion. So we don't always. We have not in the past structured ourselves so that meetings are more pro forma and just voting on things we've already discussed and decided.
So the other issue, typically to be on a consent agenda, is something would have to be, it would have to be announced for the consent agenda sort of a week ahead of time to give people a chance to object to it. So typically, so things on the consent agenda here or on the consent agenda in the packet. So you generally don't move things from board votes to the consent agenda, especially.
And I had considered that, and that's the reason why I said after resident speak out, if anything was in the resident speak out where someone would object to that, then we can always pull it out of the consent agenda. I'm fine withdrawing I think my point's been made. I really believe that, if we're here till 11:30 or midnight discussing the parliamentary procedures surrounding each one of these items and debating them, that's not something that I think we want to be doing. So
I'll try to move the meeting along.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments on the agenda?
Yes, I'm going to
Ginny?
make the meeting a little shorter by asking that we withdraw the B. 5B, it needs further work. We're not sure, there's the issue of whether the resident is on lien property or actually isn't, and whether that creates a problem for CA and the intent of CA in terms of the senior advisory committee, that residents that are appointed by a board should actually be on lien property.
But since that's
So
on
I'm
consent
just
agenda,
taking
you're
that
actually
one.
making the meeting longer talking about it.
What? Yeah, so I withdraw it. I put it on the agenda for March, but I take it off the agenda now, if that's okay.
So if you don't consent to it, we'd have to take it off the consent agenda.
Right.
Yeah, so it's off the consent agenda.
Which one was that?
The appointment of the Oakland Mills Senior Advisory Committee member.
5B.
B.
Yeah, 5B.
5B is
So
removed.
5B must be removed from the consent agenda as a
And
result of
I'm not
consent.
putting it anyplace else on the agenda for this meeting.
Any further discussions on the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay, there being none.
Andy has his hand.
Oh, Andy?
Yeah, I had mentioned that I would like to add a discussion tonight about possible mediation between board members and staff. And I was thinking we could add like just 15 minutes under board discussion to at least get that started. I understand, we would be targeting early in the new board, but if you don't start work on it soon, it's just going to delay and delay and
So
delay.
Dennis, could this be like a,
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that motion.
okay, I got a motion by Andy, a second by Bill to add 15 minutes to discuss mediation. The question I have for Dennis is, could that be just a CEO function that,
Yes.
okay, so I don't think the board needs to take any action on this.
Mr. Chairman, this is mediation between the board and the staff. I think that it is a dual issue here. It is not just for the president or any staff member to decide. And I think that we should start talking. We haven't been talking about this for a very long time.
Again, Jenny?
Yeah, well, I think we have set up a meeting where we're going to be meeting with you, and we will be seeing more meetings and more interactions, so I'm pretty pleased with the plan that the CEO president has in mind. The other thing is, you may want to think about that, if it's even needed anymore, with the new board, instead of spending money for that right now, and time. We've only got 5 more meetings, including tonight. There's a lot to do, and I just don't see the need with this board at this time. I'm really happy with what I think are going to be some positive interactions.
Any,
So-
Susan?
I thought the board voted on January 26th to do mediation. It was one of the audit committee recommendations.
Well, it wasn't.
So then there,
So I was going to say, we're looking at finding someone to do the mediation, but we were thinking that by the time we got the right person, it would be into May.
Okay.
And it would be an early meeting for the new board, and at that time, we could do mediation and also do responsibilities and duties as well.
and like a board training.
Yeah, board
Yeah.
training session in addition to mediation.
So my comment is I think Dennis is really taking this, and I'm not sure we need any further board action. Ellen?
Great.
I just want to, just so we make sure we're all operating on the same information. What the board approved was that in cases where boards and senior staff relationships are overly difficult, we would pursue mediation. And so we have a new entry to our senior staff. We have perhaps a new day, and we'll see how that goes.
Any further comments on this? Okay, I'll call the roll on the amendment. Dick?
No.
Lynn? Brian?
No.
Josh?
No?
Alan?
No.
Keith?
No.
Bill?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Ginny?
No.
I vote no, the motion fails, 2-8. Any further discussion on the agenda? Okay, is there any objections to the agenda as amended?
No.
There being no objections, the agenda is passed. Next, we'll move on to resident speak out. I will call on you one by one in the order which you signed up. Individuals have 3 minutes to comment. Anyone representing an organization has 5 minutes. Following remarks, the board will have a chance to ask questions. Please mute your microphones if you're not speaking. And the first person for resident speak out tonight is Sharon Boyes, representing Protect Our Streams. Sharon? Oh.
Good evening. Thank you
evening.
for this opportunity to express our opposition to the Lake Elkhorn project. Just like Longfellow, this project would violate CA's own watershed and open space management plans, and we want to know who's going to be held accountable for this. What does CA plan on doing to remedy the disaster in Longfellow? 2 nights of volunteers picking weeds, some wildflowers, and a dozen saplings isn't cutting it. Does anyone care about the degraded water quality or that we have to pay to dredge Wild Lake 2 years after the neighborhood forest left stacked on the backs of log trucks? We're owed, and we want accountability. Over the past year and a half, our group has sought to keep the board and the community up to date on the many serious concerns that have been raised and on the status of the Elkhorn project to the best of our ability. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said of CA. The narrative of misinformation continued at the last board meeting when, I'm paraphrasing, Dennis said the project could remove 2 trees and a shrub. There's no way CA would be okay with them taking 65 acres of trees, yet that is exactly what the plans called for, that CA agreed to with an out-of-state tree removal company. If Dennis really has zero clue about the plans, how can he possibly state it is $10 million of free work? What has he been told? After the last board meeting, I have serious concerns for several reasons about another completely inaccurate comment made regarding the project. Paraphrasing again, Dennis implied there are only a few people who are opposed to the project. I find this to be very confusing and concerning, as WSSI was providing CA with all the public comments that had been submitted to MDE and the Army Corps during the open public comment period. The public comment period closed 1 year ago today. CA created a response letter to those comments dated 2/8/22 that was first distributed to every village and CA board member on 2/14/22 by Lakey after hours and shortly before I was to give a presentation that she was well aware I was giving that night. That same response letter has been shared with the board of directors several times now in the past year. To refresh everyone's memory, the project was opposed by well over 600 people in a short period of time. There were 2 petitions created in opposition to the project. One petition garnered nearly 200 signatories. The second submitted had over 450 signatories, which also generated approximately 400 public comments in less than 1 week's time itself. There were thousands of comments in total submitted by over 470 people. In addition to those comments, the agencies received letters in opposition to the project from the following, but not limited to: Senator Guy Guzzoni, Delegate Vanessa Atterbury, Delegate Shane Pendergrass, Delegate Jen Terrassa, Senator Clarence Lamb, Delegate Eric Ebersol, Delegate Jessica Feldmark, Delegate Terry Hill, Senator Jim Rosapep, Delegate Ben Barnes, Delegate Mary Lehman, Delegate Joseline Pena-Melnick, and Senator Brian Feldman. That's 4 state senators and 9 state delegates. Also, 3 Howard County Council members, Liz Walsh, Deb Young, and Christiana Rigby. It has also been opposed by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, the Sierra Club, the Patuxent Riverkeeper, the Maryland Ornithological Society, the Maryland Native Plant Society, Elders Climate Action, and the Hickory Ridge and Longreach Village Boards. Additionally, there have been very serious concerns raised in letters from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the Maryland Department of the Environment. A few people? I have now lost all confidence in CA's ability to oversee this project if they're willing to say only a few people are opposed to it. Why would Dennis tell you and the public that. There is no acceptable explanation for this continued narrative of misinformation. Why would the board of the public have any reason to trust CA at this point? It is imperative that the board immediately take over all oversight of this project. The plans must be submitted to the board upon receipt for immediate review, and the board should have the final say before it is too late to get out of the arrangement. It is no fault of the community or the board that CA did not disclose crucial information. But now that it is well known, this board must act on behalf of the community and take action to protect the open space. From Voltaire, I quote, "Anyone who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." Board members, do not believe the absurdities. Do not allow these atrocities to be committed in our open space. And please consider who you trust moving forward. I implore you to protect our ponds and forests and streams. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Helen?
I can give you my answer to your question, and actually more of a question to you. And some of this may have happened while I was off the board, but I will say that what I hear and see is mostly protect our streams, and we had one visit from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. So it would help me. And my question to you, is it possible for you to resurrect, and I've seen the questions from the official questions from MDE. Is it possible for you to gather, you named a bunch of people who apparently have made statements against it. You talked about a bunch of organizations. It would help me to see those. So if you have those, please get them to us.
I will definitely share all of the letters that those organizations submitted, including the elected officials. And I think that Dara is going to have something very interesting for her presentation tonight regarding the rest of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I actually do have one question. In your testimony, you referred to CA not being aware of a plan.
I'm sorry, would you?
In your testimony, you referred to CA not knowing what the plan is. So the question I have is there a plan that we should be aware of, a design engineering plan to do this that the board should be aware of?
Well, everything that we've been talking about for a year and a half was the plan that was submitted in the prospectus. And that's the only thing that we've had to go on. And that plan clearly shows that 65 acres of mature forest will be removed, more wetland forest than the ICC connector highway in Montgomery County. We've never seen any other new plans, and per the flow chart, we never were going to see the new plans, nor is the board. Right now, the only people who will see the new plan is CA and the Watershed Advisory Committee, and they will be having final say on if the project moves forward or not. The thing is, they already sent in a letter in support of the project approving the removal of 65 acres of forest. So why would we feel confident that they should be making the final decision on this plan?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Joan Lankos.
I am Joan Lankos, and I have paid the CA lien for 47 years. Members of this board have complained publicly recently about the long resident speak-out portions of your meetings. Perhaps if this group was more honest with the community you represent and had better ethics, then fewer people would be showing up to publicly chastise you. Of course, it doesn't seem to matter what people say because you do whatever you want anyway. A member of this board, Alan Klein, has had at least 2 ethics complaints against him in the past several years. In 2021, Mr. Klein was actually voted off the island by his fellow board members for having manipulated the signature page of his Code of Ethics policy to remove certain requirements before he signed it. 3 years in a row. It was just a juvenile prank, he explained. In 2015, a complaint against him argued that he violated the good faith and loyalty provisions of the CA Code. I don't know the resolution of that complaint. More recently, a request for information under the Maryland HOA Act prompted a response from CA that indicated that since May 2022, ethics violations have been filed against CA board members and staff. Not all violations have been investigated. Ethics violations against some board members have been substantiated, but no action has been taken to date. No ethics violations against CA staff were substantiated. CA staff took appropriate action to notify CA's lenders and insurers as necessary. The January 5, 2023 Audit Committee report expressed significant concerns about board ethics. While you did adopt some of the recommendations in the report in its entirety raised alarms within the community as to just what kinds of things are happening behind the doors of the closed meeting. Specifically, it is appalling that an ethics violation against one or more board members was investigated and substantiated, but no action was taken against the board member or members. Apparently not even a slap on the wrist. Nearly a year ago, this board was presented with a proposed new ethics policy for the board of directors. Instead of approving the document prepared by legal counsel and human resource professionals, this board tasked a fellow board member with no professional experience in this field to craft a new document which has yet to be discussed or adopted. As a lien payer, I want to see as part of the new ethics policy a requirement for a regularly updated formal ethics report that would include non-specific information about any filed complaints, as well as whether those complaints were investigated, substantiated, and whether there were any action taken to resolve the complaint. Ethics complaints against any board member are an issue of transparency that the community should be able to easily see. As we head into the next election season, this information is vitally important to the voters as they decide who should represent them. This is a 2015 Columbia Flyer report, thing about a CA board member facing an ethics violation. We don't have the press anymore. We need our people to stand up.
Thank you. Your time. Do we have any questions? And before anyone asks any questions, I will remind the board that no information from a closed meeting should be disclosed in an open session. So do we have any... With that in mind, do we have any questions? There being none, thank you.
God forbid we should let anybody know who did what when.
Thank you. Next, we have Sky Anderson.
I think everybody knows me by now, but I'm Sky from Clary's Forest, and I have 4 quick items tonight. Number 1, subject matter experts, or SMEs. I've mentioned these before in greater detail, and I really wish the board had taken the advice of your subject matter experts in the first couple of meetings this year. That's what SMEs are for. And remember that this board is a role model for other village boards. In fact, one village board recently voted against a unanimous recommendation by a committee they themselves created. Number 2, conflict of interest and apparent conflict of interest. I heard that Josh Friedman is Lynn Egan's personal attorney. They are 2 recent additions to this board and are related in that one is the other's attorney. Enough said. Number 3, the upcoming vote to donate to the IAT. I assume that the 3 CA board members will recuse themselves from this vote, since they are on the board of both the IAT and CA. Recusing means not only not voting, but also not taking part in the discussion, to include leaving the room until after the vote is taken. On February 16th, at the recorded CA Village Election Information Session, the CA chair said these 3 CA board members are board liaisons to the IAT. In my experience and that of others, liaisons do not have voting privileges. They are the go-betweens and the advisors. But it depends on what you say the rules are, and you can change any definition you want. And finally, resident speak out. I thought it was interesting at the last meeting that right after I had mentioned the CA Speak Out webpage states that only a 1-minute question period is allowed after a resident speaking, that the residents immediately following me received 15 minutes of back and forth. A better way to handle speak outs is for one of 3 purposes. Number 1, the issue is important enough to put on a future agenda. 2, the board should refer the resident to the appropriate person or office for a solution or an answer. Or 3, the board simply says, thank you, and moves on. And now I will move on.
Thank you. And if I misspoke about crossover board members for IAT, I apologize. With that, are there any questions? Thank you. Next, we have Dara Baker.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see everybody. So first off, I wanted to counter verbally and visually Dennis Maddie's absurd assertion that Sharon mentioned that opposition to the project is just 2 to 3 people. This is the CA door knocking petition that we did at the beginning of our discussions with the community to get people. There are 220 names on here, not including the organizations that Sharon mentioned, not including the 470 residents who signed on to the Sierra Club petition. I also know of community members and neighbors of mine who have written into the board, and as far as I know, they've never received a response. I don't know if you've actually ever seen their comments. So, you know, that is a bit of a concern. So there's a reason it has taken over a year for WSSI to resubmit to the regulatory boards, and that's because of professional, expert, and public opposition. I'm here because I'm willing to take the time out to do this, not because nobody else cares. Second, I want to demonstrate my efforts to support the board in their decision-making and in protecting our resources. Ideally, that would mean that the board votes to rescind the easement. It was WSSI's decision to spend the money as an investment. CA residents, the board, and our environment do not owe WSSI anything. At minimum, the board should revoke the easement for Reach 1 from High Toe Road to Jackson Pond, the area that even the Maryland Department of Environment says is not the right area for an in-stream construction project. If the board will not take that step to vote or amend the easement, then it is critical that the board take steps to protect their and our interests through an amendment to the contract that I highlighted at the last board meeting. As promised, I will provide you with an amendment to the amendment of the 5th of August 2021 to the contract between CA, WSSI, and Davie Group. This amendment will give the CA Board actual review powers and the opportunity to include critical community and stakeholder input. Most importantly, it provides time needed to understand what is proposed in the Phase 1 project plans. Unlike when the original easement for the project was requested and granted in 11 minutes, making it sound like every other small easement that this board has ever done, rather than the massive 6-mile project that it is to fundamentally change the outline, the environment, and the structure of this community. It should be incredibly obvious to everyone on the board that this is a complicated project, a complicated process with generational impacts, and the CA board and staff must do all they can to assure legitimate, thorough review. And I hate to say it, I'm not convinced that we're going to get that from CA staff. There's also an immediate urgency. You know, despite what Dennis said last week, once the funding mechanism is approved, once WSSI and Davie have the money, what's to stop them from going forward?
Your time. Thanks. Do you have any questions?
I do have one. You talked a couple of times about amending the easement. This is just a yes/no question. Do you know whether CA can unilaterally amend the easement?
We're still waiting for an answer from CA's own general counsel from a question that the chair asked a number of meetings ago on that question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rashida George. Rashida? Richard Bannister. Richard?
Oh, there he is.
Hey, Richard, I can't hear you yet. I think you're on mute. I still can't hear you.
Here he goes.
Now I can barely hear you.
I can hear, I think this speaker is on.
That's weird.
He's off mute.
Yeah, I know he's off mute. It's on our end.
It might be our end. Let me.
Why would it change on
Just
our
bear with us for a second.
Can you speak into your mic too, please?
I think it's our.
Hang on, Richard, we're working on it.
Wait a minute, Richard, hold it, time out.
Maybe he can't
Back,
hear
let me
us.
check the audio routing of it.
I'm trying to know why it would change from one person to another.
You can hear it on the back?
Richard, we're going for a commercial. We'll be right back.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get the,
Hang on.
hang on, we'll get this sorted out.
How about getting someone the next one?
There's, the other one's also virtual.
Oh,
How about, do we have anybody else?
That's
live?
it. We just have 2 virtual people left. So.
Oh, I can see myself in the back there. All right.
Wait, Richard.
No, not really. I can't really see.
okay.
Okay, I think we can,
Richard, we need you to start over.
okay.
Yeah, can you
We can hear you now.
All right.
Okay, and you can hear me. Okay, great. So I can't actually see myself, but this is taken from the prospectus. This is a concept plan for Reach 1 of the Lake Alcorn project. Yes, there is a plan. It may be hard to see it on Zoom, so I've posted it to our Protect Our Stream Columbia Facebook page, and it will be available on our upcoming website later in the spring. Using the legend, we can see where the limits of disturbance are, the black line, where the euphemistic natural channel design is proposed, and where step pools are to be installed. In forested areas, which this is, the process of natural channel design and step pools both require massive tree removal. It's in the nature of those construction methods. All the previously completed stream restorations in Columbia employed these methods, and being mainly in forested areas, all areas suffered extensive tree loss, which can still be seen today, even those completed 10 years ago. So how many trees will be lost? We heard at the last board meeting that it's not going to be 66 acres. CA staff won't allow that, which leaves me wondering if CA staff are comfortable with 65 acres of tree loss. Looking at the plan, we can see the limit of disturbance. And that's where the bulldozers can go to work. It's everything contained within the thick black line. Also on this plan, we can see 1 inch equals 400 feet. Using a ruler, we can see that, for instance, where Reach 1 ends at Jackson Pond, the limit of disturbance is 1/4 of an inch. Simple math, 1/4 of 400 is 100. That is, the limit of disturbance is 100 feet wide. Measure 1 1/8 of an inch, or 450 feet from that point and going upstream. 450 times 100 equals 45,000 square feet, or approximately 1 acre. So for anyone familiar with the trail, when you walk from Jackson Pond to the signposted trail crossroad, that's about 1.5 acres of forest that's susceptible to being extensive tree removal in just that short section. In the prospectus, there are 5 reaches amounting to 33,000 linear feet of restoration. At 100 feet wide, that equals 73 acres. If my calculations are too high by 20%, that's still almost 60 acres of tree loss. WSSI has already done a tree survey in this area. They could easily make a decent estimate of just how many acres of trees they need to remove in order to implement this concept plan. And let me assure you, it's way more than 3 trees and a couple of bushes, as was suggested as a possibility at the last board meeting. Why can't CA and WSSI say how many acres of trees will be lost? Are they not proud of this project? Aren't they excited to share the details? After all, this is supposed to be exclusively for our social welfare. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Thank you. Next, we have Sue Bannister. Hey. Yeah, I think you're on mute.
There it goes.
Yep. Okay now?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. I appreciate the board's attention to our ongoing community concerns regarding the in-stream channel engineering project known as the Lake Elkhorn Mitigation Bank. The Maryland Department of the Environment commented as recently as March of last year, 2022, many CA residents are opposed to the project. It does not seem that CA has fully considered the desires of the community when proposing this stream restoration. So this is in addition to what Sharon and Dara and Richard already presented. Just to be clear, residents of Columbia have been raising serious questions without receiving serious answers about the downsides, risks, and project failures associated with the in-stream channel engineering processes to be used here for the Lake Elkhorn Mitigation Bank project. From day one in August of 2021, members of the community have asked about risks especially the risk to the mature woods, diverse forest and trees that line the paths and streams that wind through our Long-Reach community and beyond. Presentations by CA staff and WSSI avoided the likelihood of project failure, the extent of project impacts, how negative outcomes would affect residents, and what that would mean for our community. That left the community itself to investigate the issue of project risks. The lack of legitimate answers to risk-related questions spurred residents to find information elsewhere. The quality and quantity of information about project failures, risks, and community pushbacks against these projects was alarming. Researchers, site visits, community residents here and throughout the region, environmentalists, scientists, and other experts consider the process used, known as stream channel engineering, controversial at best, with the likelihood of success extremely limited and the risks of failure particularly high in cities and developed suburbs like ours. This means that we don't know why CA didn't know about this, and it's not too late to stop it. Community members were alerted to some of the downsides by the presence of failed projects in Wild Lake, Longfellow neighborhoods. That stream restoration was already spectacularly failing into the distress and outrage of residents, yet CA brushed it off. The Chesapeake Bay Foundation comment in January 2022 included, from a site visit by its restoration scientist, the forest canopy covering throughout most of the floodplain is impressive, with an understory of mostly spice bush. Construction would result in forest fragmentation and the temporary loss of significant recreation access for the community. It was clear that the trail system is the prize of the community, which consists of a diverse population in age and race using this trail. Kids use the trail to walk to school, and sports teams use it for training.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That concludes resident speak up for tonight's meeting. To limit interruptions during board discussions and voting, all members of the general public will now be returned to the audience. This means you will no longer be able to show your camera or unmute your audio, but you're more than welcome to stay on as an attendee to watch the remainder of the session. You can also watch a live stream on the CA Livestream YouTube page. Thank you so much for your participation tonight. I'll now take a moment to allow staff to make this transition.
Go back to watershed.
Well, that's the secret door to the.
Any objections to a 5-minute recess?
We need to involve them. Oh, yeah.
We'll take a 5-minute recess. We'll reconvene at 10:00.
I mean, that's interesting, yeah, I mean.
The agenda is the consent agenda. Under the consent agenda, we have the approval of the BOD minutes from January 26, 2023. We also have the approval of the appointee of the Senior Advisory Committee from Town Center and the approval of the appointee to the Senior Advisory Committee from Harper's Choice. Next item on the agenda is 6A, approval and appointment of the CA interim president and CEO.
So moved.
The chair, Ginny moves.
Second.
Alan seconds. That we approve the following resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors hereby removes Lakey K. Boyd as President CEO of the corporation as of January 26, 2023. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors hereby appoints Dennis Matty as the interim President CEO of the corporation as of February 23, 2023 until the appointment of a new President CEO. The motion is made by Ginny, second by Alan, and I will call the roll. Dick?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Bill?
I'm going to abstain.
Andy?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
I vote yes. The motion passes 901. Congratulations.
So if I could just say one thing, I would say that it's a responsibility that I take very seriously, and that I know that you guys have choices, and you could have picked someone else to do this job, and that we're not always going to agree, but there will always be discussion. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us on to item 6B, the annual charge rate. So the chair moves that we maintain the annual charge rate at 68 cents.
I second.
And Andy seconds. Any discussion on the motion? I will call the roll. Dick, on maintain.
Excuse me,
Dick, on the motion to maintain the annual charge rate at 68
yes,
cents.
yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
And I vote yes, motion passes 10-0. Next we have,
Can I ask point of something? I don't know what it's supposed to be, but do we have to call roll each time, or can we only call roll as a default if they're...
I generally like to call for some of the important motions. So this motion affects everybody's annual charge bill. So it's fairly significant to the community. But most sort of the, I want to say the lesser motions, but sort of the other motions, I will generally just ask if there are any objections if I know that there's going to be consent.
And in the past, we've had people voting no.
Yeah, and I also want to make sure that if someone wants to vote no or abstain, that they have that opportunity. But this is a voting session, so generally I'll be calling roll.
Okay.
And I'll try to do it fairly efficiently.
Just consider the alternative, that if we didn't vote on this and people ask, well, why didn't you even, voice your individual vote on it?
Oh.
Want to make sure that.
We could do a raise of hands.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be another way to do it.
Well, but the problem with that is then it's hard for it to be recorded in the minutes. Right. But I will go on to item 6C, the annual charge cap. The chair moves that we maintain the annual charge cap at 3.5%. Ginny seconds it. Any discussion? No discussion. I'll call the roll. Dick?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
And I vote yes, the motion passes 10-0. Next, we have motion 6D to set the capital budget at $11 million.
I'd like to make a motion.
The chair moves, Keith seconds. Andy?
I would like to make an amendment which basically says we accept the capital budget as submitted by staff.
Okay. That's fair. So I'll accept that as a friendly amendment. So the motion is to accept the capital budget as presented by staff. I believe that's still at 11 million.
Second.
And that's seconded by Keith, moved by the chair, seconded by Keith. I'll call the roll. Dick?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
I vote yes, the motion passes 10-0. Next, we have a motion by the chair to approve a $200,000 grant for FY24 to the Inner Arbor Trust, funded by a reduction in the annual charge abatement reserve of $125,000 and a reduction in the community operations general operation expenses of $75,000. The proposed reduction of $75,000 would reduce the amount of $25,000 from the planned incremental aquatic weed harvesting and surveying work. Ginny?
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment to,
First, can I get a second on that? You want a second?
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by the chair, second by Ginny, and would you like to make an amendment?
yeah, we're talking about E.
Yeah, E.
Okay, on E, and there's an attachment here, page 1 that I'm referring to, that explains it. I would like to put a period after abatement reserve and scratch and delete the rest of the sentence. So it would read, motion to approve a $200,000 grant for FY24 to Inner Arbor Trust funded by a reduction in the annual charge abatement reserve of $200,000, period. So we're not reducing from open space and other places, it's strictly coming from, what is it, 1.2?
It'd simply come from the abatement reserve. I'll second the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment?
Yeah, I'd like to know, what financial basis do you have for that? What analysis did you do to determine that that would be fiscally helpful for this organization, that we could just pull that money from one pot? Or what have you done in that? What numbers can you show us?
Susan?
That wasn't
I'm not
Susan's.
aware of
Oh, I mean, Susan
it.
had her hand up.
His question was of Ginny, I think.
Because Ginny's the one that said, let's just take it from this one place. I was wondering what the analysis was. I'd like to see that before I vote on this.
Yeah, sure, and I'm looking at more of where it would be taken, this 75,000, and I find that unacceptable, so I don't see any problem with just taking it from the charge. It's, what, 1.2 million, 3 million in there from the abatement reserve, and it's, my understanding is it's not being used that much, so I don't see the problem.
I beg to differ. I heard at our work session that it is in fact being used, and it's actually being used more often, and it is actually costing us more and more each year. So we're actually putting ourselves in danger by pulling farther down on that bucket. That's completely different from what we heard at our work session.
So the question I have is, over the past several years, what's been the trajectory of the abatement reserve?
What?
What's been the trajectory of the abatement reserve? Is it going up, going down?
We mentioned that last time, it's going up.
So the reserve money is going up, so it sounds like
Because
there's,
the need is going up.
but so it sounds like there's less risk at the money going into that pot has been going up.
I think you're misinformed on that, Mr.
No.
Chairman.
I don't think that's correct.
Okay, okay.
I think what we're saying is the charges against the reserve, the amount of the reserve that we put up is to protect us from having to take an additional hit off of the income statement, and the amount of charges against that reserve have been going up steadily.
Andy?
And I'd like to point out that, the county just recently implemented a new senior credit, which takes effect this July. And it will impact us because we piggyback off of it. And so we're going to see even more, because that's going to reduce the charge. So I think staff says they're comfortable with 125, and I would stay with 125 unless somebody has some other analysis that can justify going higher.
Dennis?
So I would say staff didn't recommend 200 out of the abatement originally, and it's a question of who wants to take the risk on whether or not that money is needed. It's a risk, and the board can vote on whether or not they want to take that risk. Staff did not want to take that risk, but ultimately, it is the board's decision.
So I guess the question before the board is, how big is that risk? That's the question that the board has to wrestle with.
I think,
Who hasn't?
Go ahead, Keith.
So I think the challenge I had with this, even with the analysis, is that Typically, when you set aside funds for a reserve, the idea of pulling money back from a reserve in particular to fund anything that's considered to be an ongoing expense in any meaningful way is just not, it doesn't feel like good common practice. It's raiding the Social Security Fund or whatever the case may be. It never ends up working out the way that we expect it to. And if we have a budget that the board, that the staff has presented, if we end up adding additional pieces to it, we are going to miss out on something else that we've already allocated for in the board. Regardless of the size of the budget, something is not going to get done in order to move forward. So what I was thinking along these lines is that we really should consider having a further discussion down the road about this. And I would be in favor of moving forward with the plan as has been presented without any of these adjustments.
Okay.
I just wanted to follow up, and I agree with Dennis's assertion that it's our choice. But I think especially in dealing with things like the budget and our fiscal well-being, we should make those choices backed up with every bit of analysis and professional support. As we heard from resident speak out, subject matter experts, we should not be doing this based on gut feeling or just a simple analysis without thoroughly investigating whether this is a prudent move or not. This is dangerous.
Alan?
Absolutely agree with being prudent, and I thought what Keith pointed out about reserves is applicable. I would just point out that we may be spending a lot of time on, feels to me like we may be going about this backwards, because this is sort of assuming that we're going to do 200,000. We're spending a lot of time on how to do the 200,000. Another way to solve this is to do nothing and not have a grant to the Inner Harbor Corporation, so which is where I want to be.
Ginny?
Okay. Well, I'll speak to more if we want to give a grant. I find it unacceptable to reduce $75,000 from weed harvesting. Encroachment really concerns me. So we'd be reducing surveying work associated with encroachments. I think that's a problem in Columbia. And invasive weed management is a very serious problem. So I'm not willing to take it from there. And it's not an ongoing thing. This is this year, the board would decide next year whether to do things or look at the whole IAT and everything else and figure out what to do. So this is a one-shot deal. And in the past, we've given grants to the IAT. So I see no problem with this year. I don't think it commits us the other years. And I find the alternatives here unacceptable in terms of our open space. So
Agreed.
So that's why I proposed the amendment.
Any further discussion on the amendment?
I'll just agree with Ginny and say that if the alternative, the 75,000, the activities associated with the difference there are unacceptable, then I would recommend that 200,000 in total is unacceptable.
Okay, there being no further discussion.
There is some further discussion.
Dick?
An issue was raised in resident speak out as to whether I am able to speak up on this issue.
Dick, is this on the amendment?
Yes, I would like to talk about the amendment, but I've been asked to recuse myself.
You have the floor, so you're free to talk.
I have been asked to recuse myself because I do represent CA on the Inner Harbor Board. And this has come up in several other discussions as to whether those of us who serve as crossover members can speak up on this question and vote on it. When I sit on the Inner Harbor Board, I sit on as a watchdog for CA. The original plan was there'd be a 5-member board that CA would control because we'd have 3 members. And then there was kind of a last-minute switcheroo, and suddenly there were 7 members, and CA lost its control. And I go there because, as many of you know, I was very much opposed to the original easement that created Inner Harbor. And I do not feel I have any conflict of interest when I sit here on the CA board, because I'm looking at what is important to CA, and only what is important.
Do you have any
to
comments
CA.
on the amendment?
So I just want to state that I understand that people think I have a responsibility here to recuse myself, but I do not believe I do. And as for the amendment, I do think, I'm not sure that 200,000 is the right number, but I do think that in order to protect our land, it is our land, and to get the best usage out of Symphony Woods, that we should help them with some of the kinds of expenses that they cannot get grants for. Any organization can get a grant that you can put your name on and take credit for, but there are things like insurance and...
The amendment is about, not about how they use the money, it's about where the money comes from CA.
Do you have any comments on the amendment?
Okay, well, anyway, I will be talking about this, but I just want to make it clear that I do not feel that I have a conflict of interest here.
Dennis?
So I'd like to suggest that the monies be contingent on compliance with the easement, and we don't have the FY22 audited financials yet from IAT, and we're getting into the point where we're going to, pretty soon, we're going to need the FY23.
Okay. So I believe that was a similar condition that we had last year.
Right.
So I'll entertain that amendment after we discuss this amendment. Bill?
I had a question for Dick. Have you, at any of the Inner Harbor Trust meetings, entered into any discussions about the grant process at CA or responded to any emails via the Inner Harbor Trust relating to grant money and the Columbia Association?
At Inner Harbor meetings, no, I have not talked about the grants.
But have you been present at meetings where the grant was discussed?
I'm trying, I want to answer this, so let me think.
How is this relevant to the amendment?
That's directly to the ethics issue that stands before us here. The recommendation that has been tabled that people don't fully understand, and we need to understand this.
Bill, this is not an interrogation. We're not interrogating Dick or any other member of the IAT.
I can answer that. I have not participated in any discussion of how much money was going to come from CA at all. And I have not even voted on a budget, Inner Harbor budget at this point.
I object to your answering that question because I don't think it's relevant. I object to you raising that question is not relevant to discussion now, and it also, I don't want it to seem like it's precedent setting, and that's how the board will be acting as to whether there's a conflict of interest. So I have a real problem with this discussion.
Okay. Lynn?
Yeah. Again, from my prior experience on the Inner Harbor Trust, I have not been on that board for, 10 months now?
Lynn, is this on the amendment, or is this on the question of whether?
Again, the money that the trust is requesting
That's not the
is
amendment.
for operations.
Yeah, is this on the amendment to the, yeah.
Should I repeat the amendments? People may have forgotten what it was.
Yeah, the amendment is to strike $125,000 to the abatement reserve and replace it with $200,000 to the abatement reserve and strike the rest of the motion.
Okay.
So basically, the amendment calls for, instead of $125,000 coming to the abatement reserve, it'd be the full $200,000. That's the amendment, and that's what we're voting on. If there's no further discussion on the amendment, I'll call the roll.
Okay.
Ginny, how do you vote on the amendment?
Yes.
Andy?
No.
Bill?
No.
Keith?
No.
Alan?
No.
Josh?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
I vote yes. The amendment passes 6-4. Okay, so now we have the main motion ahead of us. Dennis brought up a amendment to make the funds contingent on compliance with the easement.
Yes.
Does anybody want to move I think you're allowed to move the amendment.
Well, right now, the IAT is out of compliance with the easement agreement, which requires audited financials.
Okay.
So we don't have them for FY '22. Now, by the time this easement or this money comes into play, FY '23 would be over, and then we might always be behind.
Could you be specific so I would like to be more specific as to which audited financials that would be required?
FY '22 are required now, and FY '23 would be required in when we're in FY '24.
How about the amendment just be that whatever grant, if a grant is proposed or approved to the Inner Harbor Corporation, that it's contingent on them being compliant with the easement?
Yeah, I'd actually want to be specific as far as what is the requirement.
I think so too.
But it might change depending upon the date that funds get
Yeah, but it has to be
transferred.
about the order.
And basically what you're bringing up is making sure that we have the audit financial.
Yes.
That's the key thing. So because it's a pretty clear line, I think what we can just, the chair will make a motion to make an amendment to make the disbursement of the funds contingent on the FY '22 and FY '23 audited financial statements to CA. Okay. Can I get a second on the amendment?
I have a question. Okay, this is where
Well, first, can I get a second on the amendment?
Okay, well.
Got a second.
Okay, so Brian seconds the chair's amendment to make the funds contingent on the FY '22 and '23 audited financial reports furnished to CA. Josh?
Okay, and this is where there's some confusion. I kind of see Alan's point here. I don't know the answer to this question. Is there a date certain that audit is required to comply with the easement? I don't know what's in the easement, so I can't speak to whether an audit is required as part of the easement.
Good question.
Susan, can you answer
So
that?
the easement requires that CA receive the audits when they're completed, so it's not a date certain.
Okay. So it doesn't sound like there's really a compliance issue based on that answer.
There is, because the intent is to have them done in a timely manner, and I don't recall if that's specific or not. There's not a specific time, but certainly a year late is not timely, right?
If there was an audit that was supposed to be done a year ago and it wasn't, I agree that would be a foul. I don't know. I don't want to modify the easement here on in a vote or modify.
Well, Josh, that's why I want to be very clear on which financial reports that are in the motion instead of being sort of.
Just so I'm clear with respect to this amendment, is the Inner Harbor Trust FY the same as our FY?
Yes.
Yes.
I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
22 and 23. Okay, Alan?
Well, yeah, and I guess hearing all this conversation, it doesn't necessarily have to be about being out of compliance. We could set a requirement that they have their 22 and 23 audited financials before we disperse any money, whether that's in compliance or out of compliance with these.
And that's what we did last year. Dick?
Oh, I was just going to say that's what we did last year.
Got a friendly?
Judy?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the FY '23. One of the problems with the Inner Harbor Trust is they get money for construction, but they don't always get it for operating. In fact, they rarely do, I understand. So if it's a chicken and egg thing, if they don't have the money to pay to get an audit done, then, when do you do the audit? And why do we have to have the FY '23, which will be even more costly to them than just the FY '22?
6 months.
I don't know.
Dennis?
I would say you could set a reasonableness test and say that half the money would be, the entire amount is contingent on FY '22, and half of that entire amount would then be contingent on when the FY '23 come in. So you can't get anything until FY '22 comes in, which is reasonable. It's a year late.
Okay.
And then you set say, within 6 months, which is a reasonable date, the FY '23 has to be completed. So that'll give them seed money to get FY '22 done, but not the entire amount until FY '23 is done.
So in that case, I'll take that as a friendly, or I'll modify my amendment to make half of it contingent on FY '22 and the other half contingent on FY '23 audit reports. Is that right?
No, the entire amount is contingent on FY '22, and then half so they're already a year late on FY '22. And so that should be done. A reasonableness test would say that is okay. That, you're not going to wait a year to do it, I don't think. And then you distribute, when the FY '22 comes in, whatever half is, if 200 would be 100. And then when FY '23 comes in, the other half of the money gets distributed.
That's it. Okay, so
it's hard to say that.
I'll try to get the logic right. So half the money would be distributed when we get the FY '22 audits, and the other half would be distributed when we get the FY '23 audits. I'll just modify my amendment as such. Any further discussion on the amendment? Keith.
Okay, what's the amendment?
So the amendment is to make half of the disbursement contingent on the FY '22 audited financials, and the other half contingent on they receive half the allotment when we receive the audited '22 financials, and they receive the other half of the allotment when we're in possession of both the FY '22 and '23 financials.
I think my commentary applies then. As I'm going through this, I don't know enough about IAT at all. But as I'm going through this from pure fiscal responsibility, the fact that we're debating financials that have been delayed for a year, and I heard commentary that this money would help them to get these things done. I have candidly, given the size of the budgets that we deal with, I'm a little bit concerned that we are not holding organizations a little bit more accountable for running the business the way that it needs to. Audited financials are part and parcel of an organizational process for a large nonprofit organization, and I would hope that that would just be an assumption. So what ends up happening with all of these amendments that I'm hearing, for someone who doesn't know, because I can't say that I support or don't support IAT, is there's two things that come up for me. Is I'm really concerned about giving $200,000 or any money without really fully understanding where we are relative to the financials of the organization. The other piece, and this isn't intended to be, and I'm going to take it. I'm hoping that in the spirit of civility that this comes across the way it needs to, but in terms of having representatives on the IAT board, for this board not to know that we're that delinquent when we're talking about the types of money and the property and everything that we are attempting to manage through this organization, I have concerns about these amendments in terms of whether we need to take a step back and do a deeper dive. And the last piece, I think I can still say this within these pieces, is there is an opportunity for us, I believe, if we're willing to take money from reserves and so on and so forth, there is an opportunity for us to do a deeper dive with this whole thing, and then allocate money mid-budget, mid-year, to fund the things that we want to fund. We can make that decision as a board to take funds from one place and put it to the other, is the way that I understand budgeting. Budgeting is a general framework. It's not there are things that come up in the year in order for us to take action. So my bottom line is this discussion concerns me greatly, that we don't have better control over the financials of the organizations that we're planning to give money to.
I think Alan's next.
Yeah, I would get two things. I hope that we don't have to go through this, assuming that 200,000 doesn't get voted in. I hope this will apply, what we're talking about now will apply to the 125 and the 50.
I'll figure that out.
And I like what Keith is saying, because particularly if we're talking about taking all this from a reserve that we don't know what's the need for the reserve. I mean, I'm not in favor of doing any of it, but if we're going to do it, maybe we take it slowly and we say, let's do a little now, and then see how the reserve is going, and would it put the organization in jeopardy, then we'd have more information farther down the road.
Dick?
Well, this is a chicken and the egg situation, because in order for them to produce a audited financial, they need the money to produce it. And that's kind of the quandary they're in. They, as I pointed out, they have been getting grants, big grants. Nina has brought in a lot of money that we, CA, cannot provide because we're a C4, not a C3. So if, yeah, this is a problem. Do they have the money to do some of this back office stuff that needs to be done in order to get the grants that allow them to do things with our property that are beneficial to the entire community? And I would like to give them some certainty. I'm not going to name a number, but I like to give, and I do like Dennis's amendment, but I would like to do something to get them some money to take care of some of the back office issues, since it benefits the CA that they be dealt with.
Can I make an amendment too?
Andy, do you have a comment on the amendment?
Yeah, I kind of go along, I'll say a little bit with Keith in the sense that this whole discussion is very disturbing because all organizations know they need audits. You know, I mean, especially multi-million-dollar. And yes, I understand IT gets big grants, but at some point, those people funding the grants are going to say, what did you do with my money? You didn't, you know, I mean, an audit is kind of like the standard type of thing that you have to do. And the fact that we are sitting here again and in another year saying they still don't have an audit is like, there's a serious problem. There is a very serious problem. Okay, and this is what worries me. It's like the second year, and they've got to understand. I don't know how to make them understand. They have got to find the money to do an audit.
So here's the problem. People like to give grants for performances. People like to give donations for the BSO. People don't tend to like to give donations for audits. It's just the way that works. I think Keith is next.
Procedurally, can I make an amendment to the amendment that's going on at this point?
It's related to the amendment.
Okay. I'd like to modify the amendment to allocate, and I think this is appropriate given the nature of it, but an amendment to allocate money for an audit to be completed from the reserve funds in order to establish a better or a more responsible position for the for CA to give any further dollars.
So I'm not sure we can do that. I don't think we can impose that.
No.
Dick?
I'm sorry. There was a question to my motion.
Yeah, I don't think we can. I don't think we can impose that.
Okay, and I think we might want to get some clarification on that, because if we're allocating dollars to anything, I think we can make dollars contingent on, just like grants are made for capital projects or specific items, we can make allocations we can make grant things to, specific pieces.
And the hard part is you'd have to know what the value of the audit is, how much that costs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jenny?
I understand what you're saying, but I don't think we know how much we would be giving them for an audit, and it could be different every year. But so I think what Dennis has suggested as a friendly amendment accomplishes that without over-controlling an agency, which, I have a question about.
I'm going to second Keith's
motion. We don't want to report
motion
back, and we should be getting that, et cetera, but I just think this goes a little micromanaging too far.
Dick?
Dennis's amendment takes care of the safety thing.
Dick?
I'd like to point out that we had done this in the past where we had held back money until we got the audits, and we got the audits we were looking for. And as an example of some of the types of expenses that Inter Harbor takes on in order to protect our property, they spend over $70,000 on insurance. Now, nobody's going to give them a grant that covers $70,000 worth of insurance, and it's on our property. This is, if you want to go back to when this easement was written, which I think Alan and I agree was a stupid easement, never should have been done, but it was done, and we are legally obligated as a result of this thing. And we've got this organization that we have given responsibilities to, and we have to help keep this thing alive. I don't know what would happen if they went bankrupt. So
The amendment that I had put on the table, I thought, we had to discuss the amendments, and I believe that I agree, Dick, that, given the nature of the arrangement, that we need to keep the organization alive, and that's the reason why I believe that that providing dollars for getting audited financials so that we can step through that process and make a decision later is the most prudent thing for the CA. And just for the record, I don't have anything one way or any opinion one way or another on IAT and the value. So this is completely from a fiscal look at this organization.
So to try to sort of put your mind at ease, the fact that we're putting a restriction on the money to produce the audit financials implicitly means they need to conduct the audit. So they'll need.
There are other people.
No, the follow-on, if I played it out, and the reason why the amendment still stands for me is the follow-on for me is that based upon the audited financials, I believe the board needs to have a conversation about what's going on with the financials of the organization and the sustainability and the commitments that we've legitimately made. And I believe we need to give room for that to happen. But the first step is just to get us the documentation that we need.
Alan?
Yeah. I am someone who has an opinion on the Inner Harbor Corporation, and it is a little squirrely to me to be giving them money to do an audit, and we require them to do an audit to get the money. That there's something tautological about that. We know how much audits cost. Susan knows best of all of us how much audits cost. We could set a cap. We could set an amount. We could be willing to fund their audits or audits up to X amount. And they can, I assume, can submit the bill to us. My question to you, Susan, is have we ever made grants for a particular purpose, or have we always just sort of given a lump of money and said, use it as you want?
No, we made a specific grant a couple of years ago to pay their insurance bill, for example. It was very clear and very direct and specific.
And we gave, that's right, and you remind me, we gave them a grant to fund a pathway.
Right, there have been grants for capital or maintenance. We gave them grants for, but the insurance is probably the most clearly aligned to this discussion.
So I might even be willing to vote yes to that.
Alan, did you second?
Yes, I did.
Just want to make sure.
Okay, so I got a amendment by Keith, and could you please restate it?
I have some information.
Could you please?
It could be wrong.
I'll get to you. Could you please restate your amendment?
The amendment is to allocate the cost of, to allocate from the reserve, the cost to get a set of audited financials for the board to consider future dollars.
So that would come out of the grant money, I assume, or is that in addition to the grant money?
This would be the only thing. It is an element of the grant money, I guess. So that if we said $200,000.
So basically what you're saying is we give them $200,000 and some of that must be used to fund the audit.
No, I'm saying that we give them the money to fund the audit because that's an operating requirement. And then we make a decision at some point in the future of where we go next.
But how do we do that?
How do you do that?
This is
But that could be less than 200,000 and you'd be giving them, possibly.
Right.
Maybe not, but.
And then we make a decision.
So you've reduced the grant, is that, possibly?
So just
Necessarily.
as the conversation goes on, I get more and more uncomfortable when I hear that we had to allocate money for insurance, a few years ago, and there's other pieces. Just as a board member, and again, I'll restate, I have no skin in the game one way or the other regarding IAT. It seems that we have a responsibility to the Columbia residents to ensure this organization that we partnered with and put together is running in a fiscally responsible way. And I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just saying that based upon what I'm hearing tonight, I just have some questions.
That's fair. I just don't understand your amendment, though.
So
I
my amendment.
I don't understand what you're trying to do with the amendment.
Okay, my amendment is to allocate money for, I don't know how to say it again, honestly.
So here's the thing.
Could I restate my understanding of it?
It's his motion, so he should make the amendment, but I need to put things in sort of perspective. So there's a motion on the table to grant 200,000.
Yes.
No, it did not pass. There's a motion on the table to grant 200,000, and that would come out of the reserve fund. That's the motion.
The abatement.
The abatement. There's an amendment that has not been voted on to make that contingent on FY22 and FY23 audits. So what I'm trying to understand is, what are you trying to alter from that?
I'm trying to alter the nature of the audit amendment to say that I would like to, from the grant money. And I'm not saying I want to approve 200,000, but from the grant money that we're discussing, instead, I would like to approve a lower amount that allows them to move forward to get audited financials for future consideration.
So
For our future consideration.
So here's what I'd recommend.
You've got people with their hands up.
I just want to try to sort this out. So Keith, I know there's people with their hands up, but I want to try to sort out all these amendments to amendments to try to
Have
simplify.
some information that might be helpful. It might be helpful. I have some numbers.
I know. I'll get to you. So here's my recommendation. So we've got a series of motions. The first motion is to approve 200,000. If that fails, the second motion is to look at 125,000, and the third motion is to look at 50,000. So these motions were established in the previous work sessions. So basically, if you're proposing an even lower amount, what I would suggest is you could vote against the three motions, and then you could make a fourth motion to approve enough money to fund a audit. Does that sound like a reasonable plan?
No, because I'm concerned that any of these other items are going to get approved without that requirement that I'm looking for.
In that case, I will call the roll on your amendment. Dick, you want to?
Point of procedure there, his amendment needs a second.
It's second by Alan. Dick, did you have some information?
Okay, we've been talking about numbers, and everybody's up in the air on this. I happen to have some numbers.
Okay.
In the Inner Arbor budget, they have a line accounting/audit/legal, which was $23,000 for an audit fee, $10,000 for bookkeeping, $6,750 for tax, and legal was $5,000, and bookkeeping was $6,750, tax was $1,250, and legal was $5,000. So that's all bundled up in what it would take to provide these accounting needs.
Okay. Alan, you have something quick?
I think this is important to establish this, because I think we may have, what I'm hearing Keith do is give us new information, a new way of thinking about this, that I would like to see us get this kind of question resolved before we decide on an amount of any grant. Because I think there are serious questions that we need to be able to answer about our comfort with the organization and its stability and its soundness before we consider any amount.
Okay, we're way over time.
Right.
So, and we've got a whole bunch of amendments to get through. I will restate the motion as I understand it, and if someone has something different to add, I'll call the roll. But the current amendment to the amendment is to reduce the $200,000 grant to whatever the cost of an audit, one audit or two audits.
It could be 23,000, okay.
Both for the cost of both audits, to give them a grant to cover the cost of both audits. So that would be a reduction from $200,000 to whatever the cost of a grant to cover both audits is. Any further discussion on?
And to use the results of those audits as the basis for our further discussion.
well, that's neither here nor there.
We know the out-of-budget.
So I will.
I think that last piece is important to the amendment because I do believe that there's an opportunity to fund the organization. I just think that there's an interim step.
Well, we also have an opportunity, if we wish to take it, to sit down with the Inner Arbor and talk to them. We can do that now. We have to vote on a budget tonight, though.
Yeah,
And I just don't believe we should be cutting it below. I love Dennis's amendment, which is a compromise, but we still have 200,000. You could be talking about 20.
So I'll call the question on Keith's amendment to the amendment to reduce the grant from $200,000 to the value of 2 audits. Dick, how do you vote on?
No.
Lynn?
No.
Brian?
No.
Josh?
No.
Alan?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Bill?
No.
Andy?
Yes.
Ginny?
No.
I vote no. The motion fails 3-7. Now I'll go back to the original amendment to make it contingent on the FY22-23 funds. That was moved by me, and I think it was seconded by you, Ginny.
And then it's Dennis's.
That's from Dennis. It's Dennis, the chair. The chair moved it. So I'll call the question to make it contingent, so they would get half of it once the 22 audits are furnished, and the remaining balance once the 23 audits are furnished. Ginny.
Yes.
Bill.
No.
Keith.
No.
Alan.
Yes.
Josh.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Dick.
Yes.
Lynn.
Yes.
Andy.
Yes.
I vote yes. The amendment passes 8-2. That brings us to the original motion. So the motion is to approve $200,000 grant to the Inner Arbor Trust, funded by a reduction in the abatement reserve of $200,000, where the first $100,000, the first half would be conditioned on the FY22, receiving the FY22 audits, and the remainder would be conditioned on the FY23 audits. Any condition on the actual motion? Alan?
Yeah, we have funded this organization to the tune of millions over the years. And as Dick said, I think it was a stupid thing to do in the first place. We should not be using our residents' money to fund unaccountable private corporation. I think we should be working to bring the easement back in the Symphony Woods, our crown jewel of downtown, into CA's control. And we should not be putting any of our residents' money into this corporation.
Okay. Bill?
I just want to say that I find it troubling that one of our board members, who's a crossover member, read details of the Inner Arbor's budget into our record here. That this whole thing is ethically dubious and financially reckless, and I don't think that we're in the right place here. We're not going about this the right way. I support the Inner Arbor Trust. I believe in them, but we're doing this the absolute wrong way.
I believe the financials are public information. Is that right?
This was, I had asked Nina to justify how much.
I just want to verify
Okay,
that.
this is an estimate of what it would cost to take care of these things.
Their budget's not required to be public.
Okay.
But I had asked for this information.
Okay, thanks. Any further comments on the actual motion, Keith?
I think it's part of the motion, but again, I'll reiterate, this has nothing to do with the support for or against. This has to do with, I think that we need to manage these things a little bit more responsibly is what I look at. And it seems to be that this is a year-over-year challenge. So I'd like to see a little bit more discipline around that from the board.
Thank you. Any further comments? Going around once, twice? Okay, so I will call the question. The motion with amendments is to move to approve $200,000 grant for FY24 to the Inner Arbor Trust, funded by a reduction in the annual charge abatement reserve of $200,000. This is subject to receiving the audit financials for FY22. So once we receive the FY22 audit financials, they would get half, and the balance would be furnished once we get both FY22 and FY23. The motion is moved by the chair, seconded by Ginny. I will now call the question. Dick?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Alan?
No.
Keith?
No.
Bill?
No.
Andy?
No.
Ginny?
Yes.
I vote yes, the motion passes 6-4. That brings us to 6H, the operating budget. Chair moves to move the operating budget with, as provided in the packet, with the additional grant of $200,000 to the Inner Harbor Trust. Any discussion on the actual budget?
Just a question.
Okay, Jenny? Can I get a second on the chair's motion to move the?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Chair moves, Ginny seconds to move the operating budget. Do you have a question on the budget?
Just a quick one. Regarding when you're going to advertise for the camps. This budget gets approved tonight. Do you have the staff now on board that would take the registrations?
To take registrations, yes.
Well, okay, not to actually work the camps, I understand that. So they could start now. But my concern, as you know, is that we've gotten complaints about we're not competitive, Parks and Recreation already advertising for their camps, the private sector's advertising. So people that want to go to a Columbia camp are very worried by the time we get around to advertising in March, was their understanding. There might not be a space available.
Does this have to do with the
I'm trying to
budget?
figure out how we can get competitive with the other camps.
Our camps are full.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, no,
we're competitive.
no, that's the point. They may be full and they don't have an opportunity to then try for Parks and Rec or
Does
private.
this affect the budget at all?
No.
Well, it does if we could get more money and if we.
And wasn't it answered through the board request form?
Yes.
Yes. Any further questions on the budget?
It didn't deal with whether we currently have staff on. It was more like we don't have, my concern was whether it was saying we don't have staff to handle this.
The resident who asked the question was satisfied with the response.
There are two residents here.
Okay, thanks. Any further questions on the budget? As moved by the chair, seconded by Ginny. There being no questions, I'll call the roll. Dick?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
I vote yes, the budget passes 10-0.
Consent agenda.
Next, we have the BOD statement on the general plan as provided in your packet, item 6I. The chair moves to move the testimony concerning the draft general plan. And is there a second to the draft general plan?
I'll second that.
Dick seconds it. Any discussion on the general plan testimony as provided in 6I? Going once, going twice? Okay, in that case, I will call a question on the testimony. On moving the testimony concerning the draft general plan, Dick, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Bill?
No.
Keith?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
I vote yes, the motion passes 9-1. Next on the agenda is 6J, the interim tot resolution. The resolution, the chair moves that it is resolved that the corporation will proceed with the interim tot lot plan as presented on the February 9th, 2023 during the, as presented on February 9th, 2023 during the CA Board of Directors work session. The interim plan will include adding a third fort option to the existing 2 fort options and additional options for standalone equipment. So is there any comment on the interim tot lot resolution?
I move to approve the resolution.
Second.
The chair moves, Andy seconds. Any comments on it? Ellen?
Well, I have a question. Are Cosmic Warp and Spring Animals are what we have currently as standalone equipment, correct? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, the plan will also avoid the use of the same fort structure in immediate adjacent lots. The interim plan will continue to until the pilot program is completed by CA and the board approves the pilot program for implementation Columbia-wide. Any further discussion on the resolution? Brian?
Yeah, just a question on it's an interim plan. How does that work out? Right? So when do we review it again?
that's a good question.
So when we create the long-term strategic plan, you would be part of that process, and you would review that, and that would then take the place of the intermediate plan. When that's
Is there a timeline for that?
No.
Any further discussion on the interim plan? Ginny?
Yeah, one of the comments I got from a resident that testified at the last board meeting is she was really hoping that we could do a little bit more than this, and I'm not amending it, just, suggestion. Consider more creativity, not just the way the plan was presented, think more about not waiting for the entire plan to come in, but to think more about whether rascals are the best thing, or fire, or whatever it is, are the best thing, and maybe, be more creative. Nick may not agree with me, but be more creative now, even when you're waiting for the other plan. So I'm not amending it, it's just
You may want to...
suggestion.
I had, okay, did you want?
We agree that being creative is an improvement, but we're limited by what's available and what we can use to meet the requirements, and then I can be a lot more creative with more money. And so, I mean, to be serious, there's limitations. We have 174 tot lots. It's a lot of money, even if you spend 20,000 more each.
I'd certainly.
Brian, Keith, Keith.
Yeah, I agree. I love the commentary that we had in the resident speak out, and that's part of the reason why I was an advocate of the strategic planning piece, because I don't believe that we know enough to switch quickly right now in an interim plan. So I'd like to get moving with the interim plan and reserve a spot for us to do a little deeper dive and get community input. I agree wholeheartedly.
Brian?
Well, isn't this getting back to what Dennis said last time, that he wanted to do a test run with one of the villages? Isn't this all bunched together?
That's three different motions. That'll be the next motion.
Pardon?
That's next motion.
If you look at the next page of the.
Yeah, there's three motions. It's in there, don't worry. They'll be next.
Oh, I see it's there, but I just think it's the same conversation.
Yeah, that'll be the next motion. Bill?
Just to chime in, I'm all for innovation, but I think on an interim basis, moving forward with what we have in this resolution makes a lot of sense. Doing some experimentation in Oakland Mills as a pilot while the strategic plan is formed. On an interim basis, this is probably the best way to go. I don't think we want to experiment a lot during this time, because the strategic plan may counter some of the things that we did in the interim while being creative. So I think that this is probably the best way forward.
I mean, couldn't we just vote on the whole package of three things?
If you want to, it's on.
They're all the same.
Why don't we just knock them off?
Yeah, we can. It's probably easy. It's easiest to knock them off.
You already have the resolution in the second.
So it'll be easiest just to knock them off this way. But one question I have. So as we learn things, the next year we could sort of make modifications to the interim plan if necessary.
Yeah.
And more money if the board finds it. So given that I see no further discussion.
Can I, one piece on that? I actually didn't like the idea that this was presented as a board, as an item for the board to present on, and I said that at the work session last time, because I believe that that we have an opportunity to look at it from a strategic plan standpoint, and we want to take a look at those components. But in terms of voting on the operational plan that management is moving forward with, and I just wanted to clarify that based upon the last point. As much as I'm going to support this, I don't believe that the board should be voting on this. So when we talk about next year amending the plan, I wouldn't support that at that point. I would prefer to allow the natural process to move forward.
Okay, thanks. Dick?
Time's up on this one.
That's an interesting point, because we have to decide what's policy and what's in strategy and what's execution.
Absolutely.
And what we are trying to do here is give the staff some guidance as to what our overall objective is. And they presented a plan that looks good to us, so we want to move forward with it. But we should always
just calling into remembrance that we were discussing the specific units that were being installed in the tot lots, and I don't think that's broad guidance. I think that that's operational management, and frankly, I'd say micromanagement, the rascals, right? So,
Well,
Sounds like a bee.
it's the spirit, it's the spirit of the thing. It's the spirit of the thing, and there is a feeling, as we said, we want more imaginative approaches. A lot of people think that the rascal's kind of an inadequate response, but that is what's available. They cost, the costs are in line. So we're giving general guidance because that's helpful to the staff to have an idea what the hell we're looking for.
Yeah. Okay. I will call the question, but I will say this is actually more strategic than last year where we spent about 6 months discussing one tot lot. So we're now discussing 170 tot lots, so we're now at a much more strategic level this year. So we're improving. I'll call the question on the resolution. Dick?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Keith?
yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
I vote yes, the motion passes. Next is the pilot play area program resolution. It is resolved that the corporation will move with one village, I believe that village will be Oakland Mills, to create and implement a pilot program for reimagining the CA play tot lot areas. I won't read the rest of the resolution, it's in front of you. The chair moves the resolution, do I get a second? Vice chair seconds it. Any discussion on the resolution?
I'll just make my statement. This is the type of resolution that gives guidance to the staff, because we want a pilot program to do something different and to take feedback in, and then they can run with that based upon that. So we've done our job for the residents, and we've stated a strategic approach.
See, we're getting better already. we're improving. Any further comments on the resolution?
Just in 5 minutes, we're going exponential now. As far as
Yeah, we'll get better. I'll call the roll. Dick?
Yeah.
Lynn?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Bill?
yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Ginny?
Yeah.
I vote yes, motion passes 10-0. Next, we have a strategic resolution for the strategic plan for the play areas resolution. Columbia it is resolved that the corporation will create a committee to include village board members, CA staff, residents of Columbia to draft a strategic plan for play areas to serve Columbia for the next 20 years. The chair moves, can I get a second?
Second.
And the vice chair seconds. Any comments on the strategic plan?
I'm just going to smile and say, does anyone want to hear me again?
But
Andy.
note that strategic is actually in the resolution this time, so you can't get any more
I
top
do
shelf
have an
than that.
amendment.
Okay, Ginny, what's the amendment?
Yeah, where it reads, create a committee to include village board members. I just want to put village/CA board. We've got Brian has a lot of experience in this area, and I think it would be good to have the option for this board to have a CA board member on it or so. So that would just be a quick amendment. And where it says in residents of Columbia, I guess that's okay, but, they can have experts come from other areas and speak to the committee. What I think is implied here, I'm not sure, is that this committee could have a public hearing and listen to experts and stuff so they can better maybe.
And that's what committees do.
Because it also, obviously, when the board gets it and the board to vote on it, we will have a public hearing. So
Yes.
I just want to make sure that's kind of understood, that they have that.
And any objections to the amendment to add CA board members?
I don't think we necessarily need to have CA board members on this committee at all.
And we have staff.
I would suggest we don't have CA board members on because, in essence, there's a possibility of I'll say, directing the solution. Because it's coming to us to vote.
So 2 bites of the apple kind of thing here.
Was there a second to the amendment?
There's a second to the amendment to add CA. So this does include, the question I have is, does it require, does it require that it has village board members and CA staff and residents?
Yes.
Or so if we make the amendment, then would also require board members to be on the committee.
If you get a second to.
If we get a second. So is there a second for Ginny's amendment?
Second, that's pretty obvious.
I'll second it. Any discussion on the on Ginny's amendment to require a board member to be on the committee?
I
Okay.
can understand
That's
both
Alan.
sides of that issue.
Ellen?
I would just add to what's already been said that a CA board member could propose themselves as a resident of Columbia. So board members who are interested and have skills and knowledge could still end up being part of this committee from that point of view.
Who appoints this committee?
I assume the board would, I assume this would be a committee of the board. The board would appoint this committee, right?
I wasn't thinking that, but I suppose they could. I wasn't thinking that.
It says the corporation will create
We would
it.
reach out to village board members and CA staff, and we have a call for who's interested, and then we create a committee.
But the board would have to approve it.
Not necessarily.
If it's a committee of the board, wouldn't it? But,
It doesn't say it's a
They
committee of the
could.
They
board.
could.
Have to.
Okay.
I do have one other question. Is this at all duplicative of any other advisory committee that is there another existing advisory committee that this could reasonably be placed in? Okay.
Okay, so I'll call the question on requiring the committee be composed of CA board members in addition to the other constituents. Dick?
No.
Lynn?
No.
Brian?
No.
Josh?
No.
Alan?
No.
Keith?
No?
Bill?
No.
Andy?
No.
Jenny?
I guess I got to say yes.
I'll actually
Abstain.
I'll abstain. Sounds good. The motion fails. 181.
We're almost done.
I'll call the question on the resolution itself.
Wait,
Dick?
Eric?
Andy?
Yes. I was actually going to offer an amendment that this group, I'm worried that this group is going to conflict with the pilot. Okay, because I don't want us to have a pilot that is going in this direction, and then we put a group and then it goes like that. And so what I was going to suggest, I was going to say that this committee be formed after the pilot.
Is completed?
Yes. So that basically what comes out of the pilot feeds into this group, and not that we've got two groups going maybe in different directions.
That sounds
Or in essence, you got two things that are looking at the same play area. So that I'd like just to do the pilot first and then have that feed into this committee. So I'm going to make.
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a motion, amendment by Andy and a second by Bill to delay the strategic plan until the pilot is completed. Dennis, did you want to say anything?
I would say that, we have a limited number of team members in open space, and so doing both at the same time would be a big lift, and it would be better for us if we could do the pilot program first, and it would make sense to feed into it. Because there's some pieces of this, like the overlapping service areas, that might become a big part of the strategic plan, that we'll find out more in the pilot program for the sake of staffing. It'd be a big lift to do them both at the same time.
Alan?
The only hazy part for me is that I think I heard you say that there's no time frame on the pilot.
I did say that.
So then this is hazy. So I just want to point that out. That doing these sequentially means we don't know when this is going to happen.
Yeah, if it's Oakland Mills, actually a couple of years ago, Dennis started a pilot in Oakland Mills, and actually did a study of every tot lot in Oakland Mills and what was feasible, what wasn't. So, and had cameras up. So a lot of that work is been done. I guess it'd have to be updated. But if it's that area, he's got a lot of information. You're not really starting from scratch. So I would hope, I think people will be very impatient if it's not done in less than a year. Is that too optimistic?
I think that's reasonable.
Reasonable, okay.
So
it's not-
Then
it's not
I'll
gonna
also
drag
amend my
on.
motion to say that the pilot is to be done in a year.
Yeah.
And then after the pilot's done, the committee will automatically go into.
Well, we already passed K. What's K?
Yeah, but I can put it saying that in the strategic plan for play areas, that this committee go in existence, 1 year, in 1 year after the pilot's done.
So, okay, so I'll offer a friendly amendment that the committee begin operations in FY '25, beginning of FY '25. Okay.
Could I just suggest that maybe this isn't even necessary, that we leave it to management to decide, because I heard you say it's at least in part a resource question, and data will be coming in from the pilot, they're getting the board's approval, they don't have to rush into the strategic plan committee, but it may make more sense as information starts to come in from the pilot to start it when he's ready to start it, and then he can just go ahead with it, rather than giving him a time and date. And
the other thing I'm worried about is that without any timelines, things are likely to get lost. Dick?
I'm wondering if we need to even address this question at this point. Seems to me we can do the pilot, and the board that's in office at that time can then decide what the next steps are. And whether it's putting together a committee or building another plan or just continuing the pilot, that's up to a future board.
Bill?
What I can say is that looking in the long view, if we set this up, that the strategic plan would be FY '25, it sounds like a great question to ask potential future presidents of the organization. Find out what they want to do with a playground strategic plan.
Okay. Any further questions on the amendment? So I'll call the question on the amendment to have the strategic plan committee take into effect starting FY '25. Dick?
Sure, I'll go along with it.
Lynn?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Josh?
yes.
Alan?
I'd rather it said no later than FY '25, but I'll vote yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Jenny?
Yes.
I vote yes. The amendment passes. I'll call the question on the motion itself to begin to resolve that the corporation create a committee to include the village board members, CA staff, and residents of Columbia, and the committee would begin operations in FY '25. Jenny? On the motion.
Okay.
Yes?
Yeah.
Bill?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Keith?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
I vote yes. The resolution passes 10-0.
How do you know?
That brings us to board discussion. There's no board discussion. That brings us to questions only. Are there any questions regarding the president's report, report from IAT, or state and county legislation? Josh?
I did have a question, and again, I'm not sure if we've discussed this already, and it's my first night. The HOA Bill of Rights bill that is currently in Annapolis, there is a provision that I don't know if we've discussed. There is a provision in that bill. There's a lot of good things in that bill, but there's one provision in there that I think is very relevant to us. It would require that all of our facilities, that the charge to use those facilities for lien payers be no more than half what we charge non-lien payers. And I don't know how that would affect our bottom line. Because I looked at our rates. I know we don't charge non-lien payers double for our services. So I don't know obviously Economics 101 says if we raise that non-lien payer rate, some non-lien payers would drop. That's getting into the weeds. I'm sure if we lowered the rate for lien payers, it would be a huge financial hit. So I just don't know if we're tracking that, if we're tracking what the financial impact would be to Columbia Association if that provision passes as part of the bill.
Do you have the number of the bill, or did you?
It's somewhere. It's in our packet.
HB 29?
Yes.
Yeah. What? So any comments on
Which page is that on?
1 of 5, it's the first bill on the legislative update.
any?
Page 1.
Yeah.
First bill. Page 1.
Any comments on Josh's question? Dick?
This is interesting because we do have a business plan which says that we charge non-residents the market rate, and then we give our people a discount. And so it's worked for us for years. And I would hate to have the legislature start meddling with our business plan.
Sure. Alan?
Yeah, I mean, Susan, the memo has your name on it. I know this isn't your bailiwick, so this may be a question you have to pass on to somebody else, but the wording in here is just that we're going to monitor it. It doesn't mention this specific provision that Josh just pointed out about fees, so this sounds like a pretty significant impact. Do you know anything more about the bill or what it proposes? Because it sounds like something we ought to oppose.
So I will have to get back to you on that.
Do you know what the status of the bill is? Is it still alive?
Says it's in the House.
It's in the House?
It's my understanding it is still live.
Okay. Jenny?
Yeah, it's saying here that it's intended to apply to typical smaller HOAs.
Sure.
Or no. My point is, the village boards manage those properties. Are they a typical smaller HOA? They might be.
Probably.
Therefore, they would be really included, and we should be concerned that it would be implemented to cover our village boards, and they probably know nothing about this legislation.
Bill?
They probably have not been, I don't know if it's been shared with them, and if we've gotten their input at all. But I would agree with Josh that we need to be talking to Paul Tabersi or whoever it is, and really quickly and find out if we should be opposing this bill or getting an amendment, not only because of what we're concerned about, but the village boards as well, and share it with the village boards right away. It's just my suggestion.
Bill?
Just a follow-up point on that, we need to find out how they define smaller HOA, because that could actually drag us into it based on membership.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I didn't see that, in the bill, the latest version I read didn't say anything about a smaller, it may be intended that way, but it's not, the actual, like, enacted statute would not read like that.
Alan?
just the point, this point about a smaller HOA has nothing to do with the actual text of the bill in this sense. This is what our lobbyist always says about bills that impact the HOA, at least the people at the legislature are, they say, what are you going to say? This should only apply to smaller HOAs. Now, there are other differences, I know, and this is an ongoing thing, and I don't mean to disparage anybody, but that's simply a thing that we say that this looks like it always only ought to apply to a smaller HOA that who knows, might have I'm making this up, a dog park that they're a little place where dogs can play, and they're charging exorbitant rates for people who are from outside their HOA to use it. But the bigger problem to me with this bill is not about the size of the HOA, it's about the impact on our budget that I think is out of whack. I have another one I want to comment on, but that's...
Okay. Any further comments on this bill?
Oh, just one real quick. I think that our rate for, that we charge, the cash rate for entering pools for residents is much lower than what we charge for non-residents.
But at the same time, the bill could also apply to memberships.
Right.
So and those are not necessarily double.
Right.
And also, it could also apply to lessons too. I mean, we offer a lot of stuff, and and those rates are not necessarily double from residents to non-residents.
Yep.
Andy?
I would actually move we just oppose the bill for right now, because it causes way too many problems fiscally for the villages and us.
I agree with Andy. If we can't answer those questions now, we're not going to be meeting for a couple of weeks, and it could be way too late. So we should go in that way and see if Paul agrees. And
Dennis?
If we could always back down.
How about if you take that vote with the understanding that if it doesn't apply to CA, we wouldn't oppose it?
Oh, yeah, if it doesn't apply to C and the villages.
And the villages,
Right.
yes.
If it doesn't apply to C and the villages, but if it does apply to C and the villages, I think we should oppose it because we get too many questions and you'd need a whole lot more time to work it out. I make that motion.
Curious as to, I second.
And Alan seconded it.
I seconded it already. And I would just say that me seconding that, I don't usually second those kinds of, I'm usually on the other side of this question around bills like this.
Actually, Alan, we have been on the same side of votes tonight.
It's scary.
It's scary. We don't usually do this. I did.
You got a motion by Andy, who seconded?
Alan seconded.
And Alan seconded.
Do we know who the sponsor
To
is?
oppose bill, I'm not sure what the bill number is.
You say 29.
Bill 29.
To
House Bill 29.
To oppose HB 29.
Residential.
Was that?
Say who the sponsor.
Was that sponsored by a Howard
Somebody
County?
from, it's not a Howard County person.
No, it's
not
Delegate
hard.
Holmes.
It's, yeah.
It's Delegate Holmes.
He usually
Well, then
sponsors
that's
all these
elementary.
type of bills, you know, but it doesn't really say here.
Well, Andy has the bill.
As we
It's
said,
not
the nicest
cross-file,
possible
that's-
way, delegate.
I'm looking at the bill.
He just said,
Delegate Holmes.
That's what I'm looking at. That's, I know it's Delegate Holmes because I'm looking at the
Prince
bill.
George's delegate, yeah, and it's
Yeah.
not cross-filed, that's good
No,
news.
it's not cross-file.
So is there time to actually, do we have time to actually figure out if this actually applies to us?
That has been already determined. I think it's noted here that it would apply.
Oh, it would apply to us?
Yeah.
Okay.
It applies to us.
As written.
Okay.
As written, it applies to us.
Right.
Okay, so I'll take a vote to oppose HB 29.
Yeah.
Dick,
Yes.
Lynn,
yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Josh,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Yeah, it's still in there.
abstain. Bill,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Jenny,
Yes,
I'll abstain. Motion passes 802.
another bill.
Another bill? What's the next bill?
Yeah, HB 1024,
Yes.
elections in the villages of Columbia, voting rights. I know it passed the delegation February 8th. We talked about it at the last meeting. Some of the boards are starting to oppose it. Oakland Mills did. Real concern about what is it and how would you implement it and what's the impact on your current process, and why not just take the bill, withdraw it, discuss it with the village board so you really know what the implications are or the impact, and then draft your bill, not the other way around. So I think we should oppose this.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion by Jenny to oppose HB 1024.
I'll second that.
Dick, and a
I'll
second
second
by
that.
Lynn. Dick, she beat you. Dick, oh, do you want?
I was seconding
Oh.
her motion, and I'm concerned about this because all the villages will have to change their charters or bylaws.
Changes the charter.
Does it for them.
Alan?
I guess
I'll get to you. Oh, Alan first, then I'll get to you.
I think that the purpose of this bill,
It's to override.
I think, is a noble one, because I think we have a problem where, like in my village, each household / property / whatever, gets one vote. I understand there are other villages where that's not true. So what I would like to know, my question is, to those of you who represent a village where that's not true, how does your village handle the two questions of, well, basically the question of requirements for who gets to have a vote? Because this bill says, for example, whoever's on the lease. So it means if I'm renting a property, I could put my 4-year-old kid on the lease, and then they'd have a vote. How do you handle the question of quorum? And so I'd like to know that. That's my question.
I'll actually answer it. So River Hill is one of the odd villages when it comes to voting. So we don't actually vote by lot, we vote by resident. So in River Hill, every resident age 18 and over can cast a vote in our elections. And the way we basically handle it is sort of the same way, because the voter pool is pretty much similar to this, when you vote in state and presidential elections. So we sort of handle it the same way that when you come in to vote, you're required to furnish an ID, and we cross-check that against the Village Hill addresses. We also have a list of...
Do you have a quorum requirement?
Yes, we have a quorum requirement.
How do you establish the number for your quorum requirement?
The quorum requirement is usually based on the number of votes from the previous years, and it's computed based on that.
Usually based, or that's what your bylaw says it's based on?
That's the way I understand it.
Okay.
I'm not, I can't get into...
Thank you. So that your answer helps. So this bill doesn't put it that way. This talks about people.
Point is,
I would love to see. I would love to see it. If it was phrased that way, I would support it. But although I'm going to be in favor of us opposing this.
But
There's no feedback.
But from a River Hill standpoint, this bill goes way beyond what we currently allow. Because right now, if you're not a resident, even if you own property, I do not believe you're entitled to vote in River Hill, because it just covers a residence. And this is for board and Columbia Council
Bill also doesn't have an
elections.
age limit or anything. so.
Maybe see, oh, I'm sorry.
Bill, then I'll go to Jenny.
Yes, I think that this bill's intent is to get us closer to democracy here in Columbia in the village elections. And I don't think it's perfect, and I think we should be working with the delegation to improve it and not to outright oppose it.
Josh?
So, the big concern I have with this bill, I understand a lot of people don't like the rules as they are in your respective village, and I appreciate that. But it's a contractual arrangement that we all agreed to follow. And, there's a provision in the U.S. Constitution, it's called the Contracts Clause. It says state legislatures can't impair that freedom of contract. And it was specifically designed for this type of scenario, where a state legislature creates a private, essentially grants private relief. Because this bill only applies to the Columbia State Association. It's not a blanket provision that applies to every HOA in Maryland. So it's very specific to Columbia and to the Columbia villages. And I actually believe that it would not pass constitutional muster because it is impairing the freedom of contract that we all, even if we don't like it, and I'll be the first to admit I didn't actually read the rules before I bought my house.
You were given a package.
But we agreed to follow those rules. And we all knew we had to follow those rules when we moved here. And I also think that there's a possibility that there's going to be some unintended discrimination against people on the basis of their marital status. Because we have houses in Columbia that are still titled in the name of the man's name and wife, and it'll say on the title and wife.
With.
They take the vowels out. We couldn't afford vowels in the 70s. So it's just, and that's, going to potentially discriminate against people purely on the basis of their marital status. And I think that that's problematic too.
Jenny?
Yeah, what I would hope our letter, or whatever it would say, is that we have a lot of concerns, and actually Oakland Mills is listing some, we could list some of them, but that what we would really recommend or offer is the opportunity to work with CA staff, some CA board members, and each village board to receive feedback and not have this rushed, and I think it could be a better bill, if in fact it should be a bill. So that's all we're saying to the sponsor and the delegation now, because they voted for it too. And I think that's just the way you should handle legislation. So there's something, people get concerned when it's being pushed through without consulting people.
Andy?
I was going to say, my village discussed it, and what they did is they just wrote a letter to the delegation and the appropriate committees, just saying that what they'd like is the bill amended to address the quorum issue. Outside of that, they're not going to oppose the bill. They just would like a quorum addressed. Because once again, it brings us closer to a democratic type of government, and I can tell you my village board did not want to get in the position of opposing that.
Bill?
I just want to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't sure. Yeah, so I would suggest maybe we take that kind of position that we wanted amended to address the quorum.
Bill?
Right, now, I think that we have to fundamentally address and say that the current voting structure in Columbia is not fair or adequate, and that change needs to happen. We can't sit here and back what we currently have, because the results are not that great.
Susan, did you have a comment?
My concern is that it's the Columbia Association taking a position versus the villages. It seems to me to be more appropriate and relevant for the villages to take positions, especially if they're going to have different opinions from each other, and they certainly have different rules and different constituencies. And I know, and there's been legislation that's only applied to CA in the past. It's been written a little differently, but the cap and the phase-in were legislated in spite of our contract as well.
Dick?
I think Susan makes a good point there. It is the villages that are being affected, and maybe what we should recommend is that Jessica Feldmark talk to the villages and get their input, and that could be the CA's position, is the villagers need to be involved in this. My village was not aware of it until I called it to their attention. And I haven't heard anything back yet.
Alan?
Yeah, I get your point, Susan, and we all get elected. All of these seats are going to be impacted by this bill. So I think CA taking a position on it makes sense.
So I've got a general question. I don't have a JD or anything, but the way I read the bill, I mean, basically everyone on the title would be given a chance to vote. So say if we have some great climate change activity where all of a sudden we have a timeshare with, say, 100 people in the deed, everyone owns a week, would that be 100 votes?
Yeah.
I couldn't speak intelligently to that, but
I mean, the bill is very, very vague. It just seems like there's a potential to do a lot of vote harvesting or some odd voting.
I would agree with you, but I think the chances of a single property getting hundreds of votes is fairly remote, and we shouldn't be asking legislation to work for the most remote possibility and really be looking for providing a fairer voting system for a majority of the people that actually live here.
Lynn?
I know our village is opposed to it. In fact, Jessica's coming to our meeting the second Wednesday. She'll be on Zoom. Again, we're just concerned because there's so many things we don't know, and that every village is different, and this is an opportunity, at least, for the villages to get together, discuss their processes. Maybe we can reform some of our own processes in this process, but to have a bill that we've had no input in, no understanding of, just sort of passed, and then we have to figure out how to do it. I think they're just doing it backwards. I think the villages need to be involved first, and then.
And I'll also make a comment to your comment, Bill, that it's not actually as remote as you think. I mean, you build a new condo, a condo has 100 units, the developer's got owns 100 units before they sell one, so there's 100 votes right there.
That exists today, though. That's not different from what actually exists.
Can I respond to Josh's point?
Yeah, sure.
You raised a concern in terms of whether this bill, if passed, would be legal or not. So I would hate to see the villages have to spend money on a lawyer, or each one of them, to file a lawsuit against, or whatever you have to do. And I certainly wouldn't want to see CA spending any money legally. But if we can avoid that by just getting together, talking to people, and what is wrong with that process? Usually a legislator does that. Yeah. You talk to people to say, hey, I got this great idea that's going to impact your village. Can we get together? You spend a whole summer, quite frankly, doing that, or even more time, not this. And that's the last point. But there's one other thing in terms of how we operate, and I know we don't have a general counsel, but there are bills that impact the villages. How are we going to change what we're doing now and begin to communicate more? Read such and such a bill right away. As soon as we're aware of this bill, it should have gone to the villages right away and say, so if you could look at that, you can't respond now, but I'm without a general counsel. I know this is a great question to ask you. But anyway, so I just would like to see us communicate
it's
more
been
with the villages.
posted for
Anyway,
a few
that's off topic. So can we vote on it?
Anyway, given no further discussions, I got a motion by Ginny, a second by Lynn to oppose Bill HB 1024. Ginny, how do you vote?
It's with that understanding, we're going to work together. Yes.
Andy?
No.
Keith?
No.
Alan?
Yes.
Josh?
yes.
Brian?
No.
Lynn?
Yes.
Bill?
No?
Dick?
Yes.
I vote yes. The motion passes 6-4. Any further questions? Okay, no further questions. Any proposed new topics? Going once, going twice. No proposed new topics. We're on to chair's remarks. We have a couple of committee openings. We have a opening on the Arts Advisory Committee, an opening on the Risk Committee, and an opening on for one of the crossover directors on IAT. The chair appoints Josh Friedman on the Risk Committee and the Arts Committee, and the chair appoints Keith O'Neill as the crossover board member to IAT. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Got a motion by Dick, a second by Brian to adjourn. Any objections to adjourning? Meeting is adjourned at 9:25.
Congratulations.
And we beat the.